Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. It's another one of my Grails videos. Excuse me. I'm really pleased the way this series has been going. It gives me an opportunity to show you, yes, books that you've already seen on my videos, but it also gives me a chance to spend a little time talking about why I think they're Grail or Grailish. Now, about around the time this video comes out, it was well over, I think, a month ago, I was on Reggie Collects on his show on Wednesday night, and we talked about this series for those that watched that show. And part of our discussion went to what really defines a Grail. Okay, we've talked about how in at least what we know historically, there was only one Holy Grail, but yet we say Grails. So we were talking about, is there another term that we could use to really talk about some important books other than Grail? And I think high keys is a very good term. I mean, some of you may agree, some of you may not agree. So the point of me bringing all this up is I want to almost like rename this series as we go along. Some Grails or high keys in the collection, all right? So we'll continue with 3 more books for this video. And here I have to show you Batman 121. Now, this is the first appearance of Mr. Freeze, who was previously called Mr. Zero before his name was retconned into Mr. Freeze. I believe, what was it, Detective Comics 370 something, 379, 378, something like that. Correct me in the comments. I forgot the number. But anyway, he makes his first appearance right here. Now, why is this a Grail? Now, I've mentioned in other videos that I consider Batman 121, or at least a high key. I think anyone would agree with that. This is those Batman, those older, even though this is a Silver Age, beginning of the Silver Age, but when you have some of those older, well-known Batman villains, I would say pre-Ra's al Ghul. So we're looking at Mr. Freeze from the Silver Age, and of course we got the villains from the Golden Age, like the Joker, Two-Face, Scarecrow, the Riddler, and even in the Silver Age they have their Silver Age reintroductions. Any one of those characters, I think, is really great to have in your collection. Now, I know when people talk about value, and when the villain shows up on the screen and the villain dies, or the villain's not going to be used anymore, the value tends to tank. But I think there are some villains out there, in particular some of the older Batman villains, like Mr. Freeze, and of course his Golden Age companions, that really don't go down that much. I mean, some of them may take a little bit of a hit, but they're still very good to have in your collection. They're classic bad guys from a very well-known superhero, Batman. Probably one of the best, if not the best, rogues gallery for a comic book character. Batman has some of the best well-known villains. And along with all those, like the Joker and Two-Face and the Riddler and the Penguin, Mr. Freeze is up there with them. And that's why I think this book is a Grail for some people, or Grailish, or a high key. And this one, as I said in other videos, this one really set off my desire to get some Batman villains in my collection. Around this time when I got this was a couple months before this. I believe I showed this off for the first time in Comic Book Haul number 10. It was a few months before my son was born, so I have a lot of good memories from back then. But it was then when I started to say to myself, you know what, maybe I should start collecting some of these Batman villains. Books that I thought in the past that I wouldn't even attempt to get. And I started to get them, and I got quite a few of them. I didn't get all of them. Obviously, I don't have Batman #1, which is the first appearance of the Joker or the Catwoman, and several other books. I did have a first appearance of Two-Face, which is interesting. I did have a first appearance of Two-Face, which was Detective 66, and don't get me wrong, it was a great book. I wish I still had it. It was a restored copy. But when I went to go get my Amazing Fantasy, which I showcased in many videos, including in this series, I had to sell some stuff in addition to put some money of my own out for it. And when I was debating on whether or not should I get rid of the Detective 66, Is that a good deal? Is that not a good deal? Is that a good thing to do? And I was talking with some people, and well, I eventually went and did it anyway. I eventually got rid of it and got my Amazing Fantasy 15, which I think we could all agree was the best thing to do. It's the best thing to do because I think Spider-Man, or at least for me, is one of my favorite superheroes. And by far, I think the third best superhero, or the third most well-known superhero out there, along with Superman and Batman. And I've said that before. But it's funny though, when I was talking about it, like I said, I had a 8.5 restored, which I think today is still worth anywhere between $7,000, maybe $8,000, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, whatever it is, because it's restored. We know that restored books don't have anywhere near the value of their not restored. So I remember I was talking to someone about that. Should I get rid of the Detective? And he said that, no, I don't think you should get rid of the Detective 66 because it's more unique to have the first appearance of Two-Face. And I was like, well, maybe you're right. And I, slept on it. Then when I woke up and I said to myself, are you kidding me? I'm going to keep the restored Two-Face over getting the first appearance of Spider-Man? I don't think so. Yeah, good thing I slept on it. Well, I think it's good for many reasons, but despite all of that, it was a really wonderful ride that Batman 121 started me on, and I would like to return to maybe one day getting some of those Batman villains. But it all started, my desire to get them, my belief that I could get them, all started with Batman 121. That's why it's in this video. Let me go to another book now, a book that I've talked about before, a book that you've seen. Let me just take the plastic off of it. Amazing Spider-Man 129. If you watch my videos, you know the significance of this book. For me, this is a book I've had in my collection since the second year I started collecting back in 1994. And the fact that I had this graded a few years ago, and it came back a 9.2 is really amazing. No pun intended with the title. But short story about this, I wanted to get a big book back then, and I knew I had to spend some money. So I walked into a local con. I think it was at a Sheraton Hotel in Woodbridge, New Jersey. Walked in with $150, which I had to have taken out of my savings account back then when I was a kid. And I remember it was February, and there was a lot of snow, but the show still went on. Oddly enough, I remember calling the day before saying, well, there's snow. Are you still going to still have the show? And he said, absolutely. We're going to have people out there shoveling. The show's still going to have the show. So I wound up going with that amount of money in my pocket, looking to get a big key. I had a couple of books in mind, but eventually I came down to this one, which was one of the books I had in mind. And I saw it up on the wall, this older gentleman. I asked him how much it was. He said $150. I had $150. I gave it to him. I didn't even bother to look at the book. That's how inexperienced I was. But he handed it to me. When I got home and I opened it up, it looked great. I didn't even know to look in the back to see if it still had the Marvel stamp. I didn't know anything about it. So it was a bit of a risk. Not really a risk, because I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think I was taking a risk. It was more ignorance than a risk on my part, because I was ignorant of grading. I was ignorant of possibly the Marvel stamp was removed and all that stuff. I didn't know any of that, so I would say it's more ignorance. But as luck would have it, it was a 9.2 copy, or who knows, maybe back then it was a 9.4. But everything was intact, Marvel stamp and everything, and it's a good story to tell and to think back to. Last one for this video. I don't want to make this video too long. I know I talked a lot with Batman 121. Take the sleeve off it. This is something that I acquired a few years ago, and I think this is definitely a high key, very significant book. Not that the other two weren't significant. They're significant too. First Punisher, first Mr. Freeze. But this was also incredibly significant, I think, to a lot of people's, and especially in comic book history. Crime Suspense Stories, number 22. A lot of the EC crimes, the science fiction, and of course the pre-code horrors have been really going up. And I think a lot of times people said, "Well, I don't collect DC because there's no first appearances. They don't have anything in it that might cause the price to continue to go up." I think that was a bad move on a lot of people that are looking to diversify in their collection and to have books that might turn out to be very valuable. I think a lot of collectors skipped over an entire group within the comic book collecting realm because they thought that, well, there's no first appearances, there's none of this, there's no movies, no TV show, the value's never going to really go up, it sort of stays there. And for many years that probably was true. A lot of these books did stay, although pricey, just sort of stayed there. If now, as with everything that's spiking, these books are really starting to be rediscovered or discovered by people for the first time and realizing their significance. And this is a very significant book because of the decapitation cover. It's not the first decapitation cover or I think it might have been one of the last of that era, because it was this book, among others, that caused the Comics Code Authority to come together, which prohibited stuff like this and other things, as you would know, all the way up until the 1970s when that code started to be a little more lax, and now the code is completely gone. But the decapitation cover, there were other decapitation covers, but this is probably the most famous and the one that I like the most. I've seen others that I like, but I can't think of any other one, a book like this, that I would want my collection more than Crime Suspense Stories, number 22. It's a fantastic book, fantastic cover, and a wonderful piece of comic book history. Well, I hope you enjoyed this latest edition of Comic Book Grails. I'll make several more of these before I end the series. Gives me a chance to talk about some of the books that we really, really love. Take care, everyone, and be safe.